I want to talk to you about a universal tax your business is paying. Every business seems to be paying it. It's the thing that happens in every organization. It's like a water faucet that is just leaking, 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 and nobody seems to know that water faucet is even turned on. It is costing you millions. Let's talk about it. Every organization that I go into, whether it's SaaS or healthcare or a services company, whenever I walk in, I see some of the same common patterns that all connect to this hidden tax. And the thing is, the CEOs and the leaders, they all have big ideas. They all have big ambitions. They all have clear goals. Many of them know exactly what they want, especially on the revenue side. They know they have a particular thing they're trying to accomplish, value they're trying to create. They've got smart people. They got big ambitions. Yet they still are not moving as fast as they think they should. They say things are moving too slow, deadlines are slipping, the work isn't getting done on time. And then you look at the team and the team's like, hey, I'm working as hard as I can. I've got more things going than I can put my hands on. We have so many objectives that we're trying to get done. You should be proud of how much we're accomplishing with, such tight deadlines and so many constraints and, the resources that we have and. Does this sound familiar? Does this sound like something that you're experiencing? The truth is it happens at every single revenue size because the hidden tax shows up everywhere. And that's what we're going to get into today. I call this execution drag. This is the hidden tax. Is usually around 30% of your current resources in execution drag. And let me give you just a real quick example of how I think you can visualize this. I live in Austin, and when I'm driving across to Houston, I go through a bunch of small towns. And there's an experience in these towns where literally you might be going 75 miles an hour, and then boom, all of a sudden you got to shrink down to 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour. And it's the same road. You're going the same direction. You're in the same vehicle. Got all the same people in the car, but yet just like that, you have to slow down. And it feels like such a huge drag. It feels like all of a sudden you're going through molasses. And when you look around and you see, hey, this is not actually like a different experience. Like there's nothing to even worry about. Let's keep flying through here. This is kind of the mindset of all of us as CEOs and leaders. We have this like, let's go, let's fly through this, but something slows you down. And that's the hidden tax that I want to talk about. Execution drag is just like that. The only difference is, in my example, you're actually driving and you have a reason you're slowing down. You see a shift in the speed. But in reality, in our businesses, we never see the shift. We just look around and realize suddenly everybody's going 30 miles an hour instead of 65 miles an hour. You can't put your finger on it. And you've got great people doing what you think are great things. So why are they moving so slow? And it's not just that they are moving slow. It's not really a people problem. It's an execution drag problem. And it's very specific. It's very measurable. It covers 4 different zones, and we're going to walk through all of them. And I want to tell you exactly how this plays out in your organization so you can find the execution drag and do something about it immediately. Here's the reason why. When we take execution drag, we isolate it, and we free that 30% up, it doesn't just produce 30% more value in the business. It's a force multiplier. If you all of a sudden had a free employee drop in, parachute in, boom, all of a sudden you got a free employee you don't have to pay for. How much more would you get done? And how much more valuable would that be? Well, if it's a salesperson that you drop in and they're a great performer, a salesperson all of a sudden is going to add all kinds of revenue to your bottom line. So this is kind of what we're talking about, is this force multiplier, right? Of what are you going to do with this 30%? And I always like to say, if we can figure out where that drag is, that 30% can turn into 2x or 3x in 90 days, in 6 months. This is how we wind up having situations where, in the businesses I've worked in and the coaches and the clients that I help coach, we can have a massive change in 12 months. And it looks like 5 years of worth of work because we find that execution drag, we isolate it, and then we do the second part, which is move to what's most impactful. And those most impactful items are force multipliers. And that can all happen with the same team that you already have. So if you're thinking you need more team, you need more staff, you need to add more people so you can get more done, I want to tell you that is the red flag to execution drag. Let's start there first. So right out of the gate, I want you to think about execution drag as simply the blockers and the bottlenecks and the decision delays that are costing your business 30%. And when you take those blockers, bottlenecks, and decision delays and you remove them, not only do you get 30% back, you can then apply that 30% to your most impactful things to create 2x, 3x outcomes, right? So is that making sense? So when we do this, we're looking for where those issues are. And I like to think about this as strategy, people, and operations, because those are the 3 things I think about all the time. But the truth of it is there's 4 zones of execution drag, and we're going to step through each one of those. And the first one is actually strategic drag. So if you find that things are confusing, you lack clarity, the strategy's unclear, and I really want to make this point, like just because you have a goal, right, a revenue goal or some sort of a big outcome that you're trying to chase in the next 6 to 12 months or 3 years, the big goal isn't the strategy, right? This is just sort of looking out in the future. And hopefully, if you've got a goal, it's at least a SMART goal, right? So it's specific, measurable, et cetera. But the goal isn't the strategy. And the way I define strategy is good strategy is being able to prioritize your limited resources around what's valued and valuable so that you can create leverage to build the future you desire most. So that's kind of my standard definition of strategy. So when we apply that, let's think about strategic drag. Strategic drag are the things that feel fuzzy. They're the things that feel like it's unsure what our stepping stones are. What's the path to get from here to there, right? It's like saying, I want to get from here to California, but I don't turn my GPS on. So strategy helps you sort of understand what is the actual steps we're going to take? What's the route we're going to take to get there with our limited resources that we know creates value and is valuable, and it creates leverage. So when we do execution drag in the strategic zone, we're looking for all those things like decision delays, things where people start working, but they're actually not sure. So what it looks like is a meeting that you think goes well, but then there's meetings after the meeting because everybody's like, I don't understand. What did he want? How are we supposed to do that? Like, is somebody going to stop doing some work? Like, how do I get the resources if we're going to be prioritizing another, sales initiative or marketing initiative, or we're going to start doing SOPs? Like, how are we going to do that? There's a bunch of how questions, right, that are happening downstream. And so we want to fix all those fuzzy factors, and we want to turn those things into crystal clarity. And one of the ways that we do that is we have more effective meetings that create visibility, transparency, and you have a structure that helps these people ask the right questions in the right way so that we can then create a good line of sight of like, if this is what we want and it is strategic, then we have to make some trade-offs. We have to have clear priorities, and we need to just address the elephant in the room because we can't keep saying yes to everything. And so as a CEO, you don't want to make someone feel bad because they ask a common sense question of like, hey, how are we going to do that? And you certainly don't want to tell them, that's what I hired you for. That's your job. You figure that out. Like, it's a collective experience, right? Because at this level, whenever you're making $20 million, right? At this level, you have a lot of complexity and you have a lot of things in motion. And so people are dealing with a cross-functional, right? A cross-functional concern. It is not, and we don't want people just thinking about their departments because we don't want silos and agendas. We want to have one clear goal that everybody's moving towards. So this strategic drag zone is about providing clarity for yourself as a leader, clarity for the team so they know what matters most. And then they're prioritized by impact, and then they can do trade-offs. The way I like to think about trade-offs is the VIM framework, which is vision, intention, and means. And the vision is anything that we want. It's attainable, sustainable, and compelling. So not like the vision statement, but like, what's the thing we want? And in this case, some sort of a goal that you have in mind. And then the means part of this is all your time, tools, resources, everything you can put to bear to the thing you want. And here's the focus is on the intention. The intention is what we will do and what we will not do. It always drives trade-offs. That's what intention does. Intention says we can't do it all. We need to make some decisions, and to decide is to cut off, right? So we're going to decide not to do something. We're going to cut it off so that we can move towards something else with our priorities and our intention. So it always forces trade-offs. So strategic drag is usually a byproduct of good intentions that are not executed with trade-offs and prioritization. And so instead of having the intention part of vision, intention, and means, we just have more requests, but we don't actually have the intention to stop doing something and start doing something. So we need to fix that. And that's the easiest place to isolate is where do we have a breakdown in our VIM with our leaders, our team, and then ultimately our organization as a whole so that we can get this thing that's really important to be prioritized. Then what you'll see is that turns into clarity, and everything speeds up when things are clear. So clarity always provides velocity and it creates capacity for growth. So let's just put this into a quick chat. If you have things that you're trying to accomplish or something comes back to you that you know is valuable and you need to make a decision, if you can see that decision takes 5 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that's an example of this decision delay that I was talking about, right? Execution drag is blockers, bottlenecks, and decision delays. So this is a delay in the decision for weeks. Meanwhile, people are working. So this is productive time that's being applied or potentially misapplied in the wrong area. And most often it is being misapplied. And so that means if we have somebody work for 2 weeks, yes, they were busy and they were productive, but if what they're working on, we don't actually ship because of decisions that we're not making, or, we have a pivot or something else that's going on, then what happens is that work, even though it was productive and at one point it seemed to make sense, that work gets shelved. And so if we continue to build inventory and put it on a shelf, and then we can't sell that inventory, if you have somebody building something for weeks and then it's incomplete, you can't sell it, they put it on the shelf. You've put time into it, you put material into it, you got all this stuff going, but you can't sell it, you can't give it away, and you can't leverage it, right? So that's what is a great example of like the container that's holding 30%. There you go. That idea is holding 30% cost. You spend it in time and labor and all this other kind of stuff, but you can't ship it. You can't do anything with it. You can't build value with it. So this is a perfect illustration of like this kind of a decision delay resulting in things not getting done and or work being incomplete so that you can't deliver and build on it. And so we want good strategy in our execution drag. We want that strategic drag to not cost us a bunch of work, labor, time, material that we can't actually fundamentally ship and build on. So we need to get clear strategically first. It's almost always a great impact plan. This is what we do all the time in our 90-day plans with value horizons, problem statements, definition of done, all that good stuff. That's why we do it, because we need to know exactly what it is that we're working on and our good strategy. The next one is structural drag. So when we talk about execution drag related to people, this one hits right in the structure drag zone, right? So this is, again, another area where we have a 30% tax, right? So this is things like we've got great people. They're all having some sort of meetings. They're all trying to get work done, but we don't have an actual cadence of execution. So we don't have the right meeting rhythms that actually drive decisions and outcomes. So what I mean by that is not check-ins, not sync-ups, not more conversations as a team to ask and figure out why things aren't working. These are the meetings that actually turn into what are we going to do? What are we decided on? What kind of clear decisions are being made? These meetings actually produce results and they drive action, right? So we want a cadence of those kind of meetings, especially when we're in a high drag situation where we might be meeting a lot but nothing's getting done. That tells us a couple things. Number one is people are starving for clarity. They want to understand how to get rid of this confusion. They're looking for more understanding of what role they play. They're asking things like, am I doing that? Are you doing that? And they're so caught up in how to address a goal, but they're in the confusion of not knowing who's going to do what and how they're going to do it. And then we have all this mistiming. These give-gets aren't working out right. And so people leave meetings and they're like, okay, I think I understand what we need. But then other people have things already in motion and they can't just stop those things in motion because they didn't talk about it. They didn't address them. And this happens all the time where people seem to be aligned in a meeting, but then the meeting after the meeting, people are like, well, yeah, totally. I totally get that, but I can't let go of this and I can't stop answering calls and I can't do this and I can't do that. So I understand what we're doing and I totally agree. We should do that. I just can't. I won't be able to. And you hear those kind of rationales and those reasons because they didn't talk about it actually in the meeting in the right kind of format. And so in those meetings, a lot of times what happens is it shows up looking like a complaint. It shows up looking like excuses. And instead of the CEO and the leadership team jumping in there and being like, okay, let's hear them. Let's address all these problems, what we call a problem purge. Let's actually address all the real problems so we can have intellectual honesty and we can talk through it. Though in these kind of meetings, that's not happening. And instead, people are just like, work harder, power through it. I hired you for a reason. Stay in your lane, bro. Get more done. I thought you were a winner, not a loser. Like all that kind of stuff, right? That is attempting to motivate people through this challenge. And instead, reality, what they're really saying is like, what's my role? Who owns this? Am I collaborating in this? Do I have assignments in this? I don't need you to think for me, but man, we got to make some decisions so some things can be prioritized. I need to let go of these things. This is like my best situation to free up capacity so that we can do these things. So this is the language of drag. And how do we address that drag structurally with our people? We need to provide clear ownership. We need to provide clear direction. We need to have capacity get released. So this is about capacity. The drag is in the capacity. They need to know that they can let go of something, firefighting, the business as usual, or being spread across too many quote unquote high priority items. Like we've got to get all that aligned so that they know, okay, I've got capacity now because I put some stuff to the side. And in that next step of having capacity, then they know exactly what their role is to execute. And then you've got a meeting structure that drives the continuous process of transparency, addressing blockers and bottlenecks, and people understanding new roles or how to chip in. And lastly, that they actually continue to ship value because we need that work to bring new value. So that means they need to be working on things that are valuable, right? So going back to good strategy, it is being able to prioritize our limited resources around what's valued and valuable so that we can create leverage for the future that we desire most. So this is how we do it structurally with people, is they're just not doing it all. They're doing the right things in the right order. They know what their role is, and they're either leading it or they're owning it or they're working through the contributor and collaboration process. The three roles I always talk about: chickens, pigs, and champions. Those three roles will get you through almost every growth initiative and they'll unlock all your execution drag. I've got some videos about chickens, pigs, and champion. You can see that. So ultimately what this means though is we've got good people who are ambitious and talented and capable. They just need to know what's been prioritized so they're working on the right things in the right order and they can actually deliver it all the way through and get that stuff out because the roles are clear, the meeting cadence is clear and all that kind of stuff. So I want you to ask yourself, how many top priorities right now are in motion? Do you have 5, 10 more priorities? And let's be honest, if you ask your leaders what their priorities are they all going to say the same thing? I bet they're not. And so again, this is where I always see execution drag because people are convinced that they have other priorities that are not the main priority. This is either from some situation in the past that they've had where they're like, okay, I'm going to own this and I'm never going to have that issue again, or this thing fell apart and I'm never going to let it fall apart again. Like whatever those things are, right? We have reasons why we're holding on to stuff that we think is highly prioritized that nobody else understands as a priority but you. And so each one of us have big priorities, but we should all have the same one priority, second priority. Like we need to get that really clear. So ask yourself, ask your team, what's the number one priority right now? And then who's got what roles with that number one priority? And then what are the things that are blocking the execution of that priority? And whatever those things are as problems, challenges, issues, instead of seeing them as excuses, let's rally around them. Let's get them clipped. Like think about it like a kite. This thing is holding back all this energy. Let's clip all those lines so it can take off and be free, right? So these blockers hold things back. So we got to figure out who owns what on what highest priority items. And then we got to do the smart thing with agreeing about trade-offs and agreeing we can't say we're going to do it all and actually rationalize what does it take to let go of some stuff. And if you've never done that before, this might be a whole project in and of itself. People may need new systems. People may need to have some delegation or training. Like that's the work because you can't actually go faster when these bottlenecks are still there. Just got to fix it. The third major drag area is operational drag. So I want you to just really quickly think about how much work gets turned into rework, right? How much work is including firefighting and this sort of endless revision process? How much operational things in your organization that should just move smoothly get stuck in multiple places? These are the baton handoffs, right? Between different colleagues and different kinds of work, right? This is where something comes in and it sits for days, sometimes weeks before it moves to the next step because somebody has to review it, look at it, they have to engage in it in some way. And there was no capacity plan for it. It's not sequenced. It's not a part of the operation, but yet it's stuck in the system of the operation, right? So how many things are in our operation that get stuck like that? And if you were to like think about it as a bunch of lines, right? Lanes that everybody's in, and just diagnose like where do things start to get stuck? Where do decisions need to happen that take a long time? Do we have a meeting for that? Are they one-offs? Are things stuck because of people's travel schedule or production schedules? Like we need to figure out the things that get bottlenecked and jammed up and they sit for days. And then the flip side of that is in some places, things don't get stuck for days. It's just this continuous stream of like using email as chat and their Slack messages and their Zoom meetings and all this kind of stuff. And in those cases, you have such a high volume of these discrete decisions that are happening and firing all the time that there's not enough production getting done. So in the operation itself, all the capacity is turning into a communication issue. It's turning into like just trying to like air traffic controller. And then we spend way more time setting and resetting expectations and trying to communicate and re-communicate what's going on, that there is no time for the team to actually do the work that's needed because so much is going on. So again, that comes back to clarity, but this is we see it in the operation itself. So ask yourself, how often do we have to rework, and how often do we have to sit and wait for something to happen that's dependent on someone else, these dependencies? And how often do we find ourselves wishing there was some way that we could get through in a systematic way, a certain process or particular way of work, right? So all those way of work questions are in the operation. And we want to operationalize the things that allow work to move more clearly. So a real simple example of that is automations, right? Using technology. Could we automate things? Another example of that is in the meeting cadence that we were talking about before. Do we need to have a more frequent set of meetings that actually make decisions or provide review cycles or allow work? So ultimately, when we're thinking about this, the real work is getting things out of people's brains and into what the organization values, right? If it's our services, if it's our production, if we're a SaaS company, like we all have things that we're building and working on. So the things that we really value, that's where the operation needs to support that kind of work getting done. And we need to figure out the things that are holding back folks because we haven't put the right operational pieces together. So we want to get as much work done inside the operation and delivered as possible. And we want to look for everything that's a blocker to delivering the value that we're intending to create. That leads us to the fourth zone of drag. This is the culture drag areas. Stephen Covey has a book and it's called The Speed of Trust. And he talks about how trust is the actual accelerator of your business. Like it's where you can press all the gas. The higher trust environment you have, the faster you can go. And what I love about that is trust is a function of people's ability and psychological safety or whatever, their ability to raise their hand with transparency and good communication and say, hey, something's not working. We need to do something about it. This is what happens in healthy teams, right? They're able to say things aren't working. What can we do? Right. So this is like conflict that's healthy and it's trying to go towards an outcome and a result, right? So conflict leading to results, not conflict that bogs you down. We're actually trying to get these high trust environments created. That all happens in the culture zone. And when we have low trust and when we have a lot of difficulty raising awareness of blockers, challenges, and issues, culturally, what we're really saying is you got to be a hero, you got to power through. You can't raise your hand and address issues. Like we don't do that around here. We just stick in our lane and we just keep our heads down. All of those kinds of things are actual dysfunctional ways of working, and they automatically lower everybody from 60 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour. And if you do it long enough, it turns people into saying, hey, like, hey, that's not my job. It's not in my job description. So if you have an environment where you have people constantly coming back to their job description, what they're really saying is, I keep getting burned every time I talk about things. So I'm not going to be a team player anymore. I'm really just going to stay in my lane and I'm going to defend this little box I'm in because I need to protect myself, because everybody's got their own agenda and they're all protecting each other or protecting themselves, not all of us together. And that's completely the wrong way we want to go. So in our culture zones, we need to break people out of those boxes, bring them together so they're all working in alignment, cross-functionally together on the same things in a high trust capacity with psychological safety so that they can raise conflict, address real issues, and the things actually get done, and they're not seen as excuses. So the more we can do to create safety and raising awareness of problems, because problems turn into solutions, right? Problems are the fuel for the future you want when you address them. Otherwise, they just wind up becoming this heavy blanket that just suffocates you, right? Because after a while, if you don't address the problems and you keep blaming the people for the problems, then what you're really saying is, my people are the problem. And in reality, it's your system, it's your leadership, it's your communication, it's your ability to do hard things. You're not prioritizing the right work. You're not actually enabling and fueling the people in your organization to do their best work because problems aren't being addressed and conflict isn't being well managed to drive results. So in our culture zone, this is most frequently showing up as stay in your lane, not my job. You didn't tell me, so I didn't do it. All those kinds of things. That's a huge tax being paid on people because trust is low, transparency is low, silos are being created. So we want to break free of all that. And the more we do, the more accelerator we can get. This is how, like just in culture alone, great culture can outperform all kinds of bad strategy because a great culture solves hard problems. They do hard things. They figure it out. So you want to instill a great culture, then you got to find that 30% tax in the organization that's robbing the culture from their best work. Right now, today, with your leaders and their downline, is it okay for them to raise blockers or their team to raise blockers? That's a good way to have a litmus test on this is, can people actually say, here's a problem, here's a blocker, and I need help? If your organization can do that, and not only does that get matched with people executing on it, it gets resourced and it gets done because it's understood how it fits in the grand scheme of things, then this culture area, this culture drag zone, is probably not a big issue for you. But if you can't see people being willing to just say, hey, we have a problem, and they ignore it, or they pretend false harmony, things like that, then there you go. Got a big culture drag area that you need to work on. As you think about execution drag, you can do exactly what I do. You can ask yourself the same set of questions that I ask. Now, I have software called Rapid Clarity that I've built that allows us to be a highly rigorous sequence of things that we step through so we can have really, really productive strategic planning in the fewest amount of time, right? And we can get the team involved. But you can do the same exact things. I always ask myself, what's most important for the next 90 days? Can I articulate it? Can they articulate it? Do we know how to break that down in 30-day cycles, so 30, 60, and 90, so that we can still articulate what's most important 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Can we clearly articulate how we know we have gotten it done? Like, if this thing is important, not only do we know it's important with the deadline, but we'll know it got done according to these dimensions, right? So, for example, I'll just use something that a lot of people have experience with, building a website. If the 90-day goal is we have to launch a website, then what does that mean to launch it? Like, how would we describe it as launched? Because a website's never really done. So your definition of done, how would you just say it's absolutely done? One of the main criteria should be like, we can process a credit card, or we can book a call, or whatever, right? Like the actual economic thing that you're trying to accomplish with that website can be classified as done. So you want to just know all the projects that you're prioritizing in the next 90 days. How do you know they got done? Because there's going to be so much that you discover and you find out along the way that will make people feel like, hey, well, that wasn't in the scope, or we didn't have time for that, or we made all these trade-offs, right? So what we want to do is be really clear on how we value the work so that we know it got done. And then those are the things that we have decision cycles against and our meeting cadences against to get these things that we described done. And we know that we ship the value because the thing got done. So most of our issues isn't good people doing great work. It is them knowing what work to work on, what role they play. So that's the next part of this is, who is the single owner of these things? Who is what I call the pig, right? The person who owns it. Who's the chicken? These are collaborators and people who have small tasks on behalf of the pig to get things to the finish line. And then who's the champion? Hopefully that's you. That's the person who enables, sponsors, and advocates. That's what a champion does. They're not the hero that swoops in, right? They're not the one who does it all, right? Instead, they're the ones who enable and lift up the team to do the best work. So that's what we want to know. When you look at the next 90 days, what are the biggest priorities? Who owns it? Who's going to collaborate on which one of these things? How can we describe it as done criteria? All these different levels of done for each thing. And then how do we mobilize the team with clarity so that anything that's a blocker or a challenge, anything that's in the way of execution on those very clearly defined things, we actually mobilize and fix those. So once you do that, you remove all kinds of execution drag, you put in operational rhythm, and you enable people to do their best work. That's what we're looking for. That's how that 30% hidden tax turns into a 2x or 3x multiplier to drive your business faster in 90 days, 6 months, 12 months than most people can do in 3 years. Hey, if you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. And I'm so glad you're here. Check out getrapidclarity.com for a weekly activity that I'm doing for blocker removal. This is exactly one of the big things that we just talked about. How do we find the blockers and how do we get them diagnosed? See more at getrapidclarity.com.